I think in terms of the Khayelitsha Commission and the Premier and the Minister, the Constitution clearly gives the powers to the Premier, 206 and 127. They give the powers to the Premier to establish a commission. But I think, the SJC and a lot of people who are working for the SJC are here. We know the challenges of working in the Western Cape. That it's going to be you are going to either be associated with the DA or the ANC. And I think as Zaki mentioned that we wanted a commission that would look into everything that contributes to the lack of safety in Khayelitsha. And it's really sad that the Premier didn't include the city of Cape Town also to be investigated by the Commission. But I think with the Commission of Inquiry, we believe that even if we know it's going to take time, it might take 5-10 years for something to be fixed, but we believe that it's going to have some change, though it's looking only at the police. Not saying that we're going to stick with that, we'll be happy with that. We're still going to continue the other work into trying to bridge or get away with party politics when it comes to basic services in Khayelitsha and in other areas in the country.
Kate, just to attempt to answer a question, I think it's a very good question, and as an attorney, I think I'm not best placed to answer that question. I went through law school and taught how to analyze facts and use case laws, but you get involved in Marikana and you learn more and say, there's more into this than just what happened on that particular day in Marikana. And all I can say is that, right now fingers are pointing up. And we are instructed to leave no stone unturned. And obviously we question some of the positions that I have a very influential people in South Africa. We interrogated Pierre on her appointment to say, you have no experience in policing, why were you appointed? And she could not tell us, And we asked her, who are you taking instructions from Nathi Mthethwa? Did you speak to Zuma as well? Did you SMS him? Can you have your phone records? It's a fact finding, but obviously you now know that there is some influence. Decisions are taken, unfortunately, and by certain levels or certain people, but executed by different arms, and which unfortunately, we have to explore that. And it's a flaw in our system, some may say, as much as the argument that was used in the Khayelitsha argument, case in the court that there's a whole separation of power, that the court should not interfere with that. It's absolutely nonsense, and sometimes we must call the guiding tools by their names. If it's a spade, it's a spade, and if Zuma was involved, then he must come to answer as well, and tell the commission to what extent was involved. Maybe it wasn't such a bad involvement, but we must explore that. Was he supposed to be involved in the first place? Maybe he was in any event, but he must not have. And our instructions really are to leave no stone unturned, because we now know that facts are no longer good to explore other avenues.
Just 3 quick points. In relation to the state and surveillance and political interference and so on, the first point I'd like to make is at every police commissioner that we've had in the post-94 period, whether it's George Fivers, Celebi, and now the current commissioner. All of them have had a situation where the current commissioner is not dismissed, but all the others were dismissed. Fivers for mentioning that there was some strange political conspiracy in which Peter Mokaba, Winnie Mandela, and someone wanted to overthrow Mandela. The second one, he resigned. He wasn't dismissed, he resigned. Jackie Selebi went to jail. Under Jackie Selebi and Becky Clearley, we saw the rise of Richard Mdluli. Mdluli and the police were directly used in inter-party fight within the ANC. When it comes to closing down political space, there's a very good study by Urban Killis, and perhaps Kathleen can also talk about this, is the public order police clearly say that they themselves are facing a situation where political officials tell them to ban protest, something for which they don't have power. The public order police will tell you that mayors and premiers don't come out to receive memos, and that causes violence and anger and so on among protesters. And while I'm at it, let me just say, I think the City Council, Cape Town City Council, acted unlawfully over the weekend to ban a protest. They don't have power to ban a protest. And we should never, never, never accept an infringement on our rights to protest, even though it is vital that we exercise that right in an appropriate manner and don't use violence. And Patricia DeLaw overstepped her powers. The third question on fixing and power, I think sometimes I feel that it's impossible to reform this police service. Sometimes I feel that, and I think all of us do at times. But I believe that what Khayelitsha is demonstrating is that community power is laying bare, opening up what is wrong with the police service there, and that we can transform it. And in this case, we didn't go to court. It was the minister who went to court. The minister went to court to stop the process. And I believe the court should be used less to do the work that Parliament should do, and the court should be used less to do the work that civil society should do, and the court should be used less to do the work that oversight of government should do. Because the failure of the police in Khayelitsha and Menenberg in Mitchells Plain is as much the Premier's, current and past Premier's, problems in the Western Cape as it is the national ministers, because they have power of oversight and they've never exercised it properly until we force them to have that oversight. So I believe, Mike, just to answer, that the power of communities, it is absolutely vital that the knowledge of what is happening in the police service becomes the power of communities. The communities need to have that knowledge, because without that, we will not be able to get to a situation where people are disciplined, the police are disciplined, and that those who really rotten apples, from commissioners to wherever, actually get dismissed and or go to jail, and that good ones actually are kept.
Can we go to the headlines tomorrow? We'll take the next three questions.
I hope the headline is Zuma goes to Marikana.
Hi, my name is Lorenzo Wakefield and I'm a researcher. It's not so much questions as opposed to comments, adding more to the dialogue. A couple of years ago, Lucas, that we did some research on, for example, police and compliance with the Domestic Violence Act in the Western Cape alone. And what we've actually found in that research was that it's actually student constables who has the most difficulty in actually applying the national instructions, which they just came out of learning while the 6 months training to do. And the question here was, are we putting too much within 6 months what we teach lawyers to do for 4 years and learning legislation and national instruction, essentially? So that's the one aspect. I'm not trying to make excuses for the police, but I think it's quite hard, essentially. The second thing is also, Lucas, you were speaking about this addressing the systemic issues of impunity or systemic issues within SAPS being in crisis. And I also think that we need to strengthen the watchdog for that matter. If we have nobody looking at assaults in police custody or torture for that matter, who's going to do it? They're going to be getting away with it all the time. And surely we should need to strengthen this. And I have to admit, to be honest and have a frank conversation, I'm not sure if we appoint someone like Robert McBride as the head of IPEC that's actually going to get this actually done, because then we're just going to see more and more levels of impunity within the police, and that's not where we should be headed, to be honest. So.
I think one of the areas that I feel is lacking is the fact that victims are left behind. So we speak about let's fix it, and we speak about reform, and for me there's a continuum happening. The Department of Justice and Constitutional Development has just released for comment the regulations for reparation community rehabilitation, stepping back from the final recommendations of the TRC. And so this is regulations that would speak to how the President's Fund for the closed victim list will be used. And what the regulations is in fact saying is that victims of that closed list would now have access to limited educational rights, limited educational compensation, and limited compensation for health. But those are rights that you should have as a citizen anyway. So we can go far back to the TRC and reparation for victims of the TRC and see that that did not materialize. And then we can come to Marikana and other torture victims where civil suits are being pursued. And it's beyond, it falls outside of the Prevention and Combating of Torture of Persons Act. Then we have the Act which criminalizes torture but leaves the victims behind because Article 14 of UNCAT is not honored. So this is my issue, that whilst we have the commissions, whilst the acknowledgement of wrongdoing is then that's taken forward in terms of the commissions, and while there are clear recommendations on reform and we move to systemic reform, the real casualties, the victims that are left behind. And I think the one issue that we neglect is to realize that whilst the direct victim might be before the court, the families of that victim are as much victims of torture as the direct victim. And there's no compensation for that, there's no redress for that. So this ripple effect in terms of how it affects not only one person but a family, and how it not only affects a family but a community and a society, and the impact it has on this country is extremely worrying. So my issue is around how do we balance, how do we create that balance between systemic reform on the one side and dealing with perpetrators on the one side, but then ensuring that victims are not left behind. And there is a culture in our country to leave victims behind and then to fight via the courts. But even when there is acknowledgement of that, the compensation is so poor that victims cannot get their lives together. And I think it's a sad indictment where nearly a decade later, we now have to comment on regulations, the TRC, and the Prevention and Combating of Torture Act, of Persons Act, does not even speak to redress, doesn't even speak to compensation, because one has to follow a civil suit. So the whole issue of how do we fix it, but how do we fix it in the sense that we don't leave victims behind and the hurts and the harm that has been done to them, how do we not leave that behind?
Hi, my name is Isaac. I'm from the Social Justice Coalition. I think I have a comment more than a question. I was listening to Lucas, who was raising a point of trying to, or maybe imagine the subs in 5 years' time. I think by just doing that, my heart beat faster than was saying bold, because it's really an organization that is faced with so much struggle, and yet the leaders or the people in the forefront are just denying that it's a crisis that needs to be addressed. And I think if our leadership can stop denying these problems and actually face them, we can then be able to fix it. And then another thing is that it's always been said that the media is exaggerating, or it is blowing it out of proportion, which means that at the end of the day, we're not looking at the facts exactly, but we are just looking to shift the blame to other people. And just to look at the whole problem as a whole, I think that I see this battle of trying to sort out the police ending up being the nation or civil society would they stand out and say, we have a problem with the SAPS and we need to look at it, because the current leadership that we have now, they're just not doing enough in ensuring that in future, how do we fix the problems that we have within the SAPS organization?
The fact that it's been said that there's a leadership problem, I mean, everybody knows that it's been shown again and again, and we saw it in Marikana for the 6 weeks that the National Commissioner was testifying. When you see the fact that there's, an allegation of an execution is brought to the attention of the National and Provincial Commissioner of the Northwest Province, and no disciplinary action is taken. And when asked why no disciplinary action was taken against the police official who executed a minor who had surrendered, the response is, we couldn't identify who it was. And it's as easy as going to a spreadsheet of individuals from that unit of the police who discharged their firearms at that place on that day and saying, here's 2 names, we've got them for you, now do an investigation. So there's it's a problem, and it's a leadership problem in large. I mean, it's obviously, it's not just one issue, but a leadership problem is a massive, massive part. And just linked to what was said about public order police being sometimes put into situations that they shouldn't be. An example is one of the water cannons that was present on the 16th of August last year in Marikana. The driver of the water cannon had training of 2 hours, and that was it. But they were driving the water cannon, and the water cannon served a huge part of the plan and the role of the police in that operation. And he had 2 hours, and if you listen to a transcript, and this is all evidence before the Commission, if you listen to a transcript of one of the helicopters that was trying to direct the water cannon on the ground, you hear things like, you're driving like you're drunk, go left, move in this direction. And that's so, training was mentioned, and training is a huge problem. Training of the police is a problem, and you're sending them into situations with insufficient training where you have a situation like that because decisions were made and they are just told you will carry this out. Without proper planning and with no coordination, what else do we expect to happen? Equipment's a huge problem. I mean, the problems are, it's massive. And then it's also just very interesting because it was said earlier about, I think you mentioned Marikana's symptoms, sort of. Another thing is this, yes, there's massive problems in the police and there's impunity and lack of accountability, no transparency, but we also need to focus on why does it get to the stage that it gets to, that Marikana did, right? So what is the role of other institutions and governments? And you have, like was mentioned, the service delivery protests, etc. We also need to focus on that what happened in Marikana is in fact a symptom of the underlying social issues that nobody's willing to address and nobody's willing to talk about. And we're talking about what happened in Marikana, which is absolutely important and relevant, and we have to do it. But when are we going to start talking about why those individuals were sitting on the Kopi for a week, why they were so angry? When are we going to start talking about the fact that 18 people lost their lives at scene 2, 14 lost their lives on scene, 4 later lost their lives in hospital? Why? Scene 2 was used as a toilet because there's no sanitation in Marikana. So when are we going to start talking about these issues as well? So it's very much linked and it's a cycle, and we can't focus on one in isolation from any of the others.